The carriage horse industry in New York City has been a controversial topic since at least the 1980s. Its supporters see it as an innocent tourist attraction, but to critics, it's a hotbed of animal abuse. Just this summer, animal rescue center The Gentle Barn released a viral TikTok showing two former New York City carriage horses being rehabilitated. The comments are filled with people upset that the horses were employed pulling carriages. And almost any time an incident occurs where a carriage horse is sick or injured, there's a loud public outcry to end the practice. Some polls have placed the interest in banning carriage rides as high as 71% among New York City residents. In 2014, Mayor de Blasio made a promise to ban horse carriage rides on day one.
We are going to get rid of the horse carriages, period. They're not humane, they're not appropriate to the year 2014. It's over.
And a bill proposed in 2022, named Rider's Bill for the brutal collapse of a horse by the same name, proposes to replace all carriage horses with electric carriages. And yet none of these measures have passed. So how has the carriage ride business, which is only made up of a few hundred people, managed to survive for decades under all this pressure and scrutiny? Carriage rides have been offered in New York City for more than a century, beginning in the late 1800s. But it wasn't until World War II, when gasoline prices soared due to rationing, that the practice rose in popularity. By the 1980s, public indignation at the condition of the carriage horses had begun to rise. Horses could be seen maneuvering through taxis and midday traffic, and news of horse crashes and deaths were making headlines. In 1985, Mayor Ed Koch restricted the horses from working in Midtown during rush hours. And in 1989, he set measures in place that would limit the carriage horses' work hours and the temperatures at which they were allowed to operate. By the early 90s, debate over the carriage horses was a political fixture. A lobbying aide for Mayor Dinkins told The New Yorker in 1993, "This will be about the fifth or sixth time this has come up in the last 10 years. The lobbying never stops. I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I will be dealing with this issue forever." And the issue really hasn't cooled down, especially since the animal rights nonprofit NYC, or New Yorkers for Clean, Livable, and Safe Streets, was founded in 2007 with the primary mission of ending carriage rides in New York.
We have passed legislation to benefit the horse carriages in terms of welfare improvements, but it's really just a drop in the bucket and things are worse than ever for the horses. So what we really, our main goal in the organization is getting these horses off the streets, however we can do that, whether that's replacing them with electric versions or whatever it takes to end this abuse.
Since NYCLAS's inception, they have consistently claimed that the horses are kept in cruel conditions in miserable stables. They point to insufficient government oversight, and every incident of a horse collapsing, passing away from illness, or getting into an accident becomes a well-publicized example of industry abuse.
It's like they're an organized crime racket, and honestly, you can say that. I'm fine with even being quoted on that because that's the truth. It really is like they are organized crime, the carriage industry. They're constantly breaking laws. They're working horses to death.
The organization has documented numerous incidents of non-compliance with traffic regulations, horses in poor health, and injured horses on the job. The carriage industry vehemently disputes all these claims. In 2010, they pushed for legislation that both gave drivers a raise and codified safety and care measures for the horses. This includes 5 weeks annual vacation, 2 annual veterinary visits, larger stables, and more. They say that their horses are well cared for, and that NYCLAS, as well as other animal rights protesters, have an emotional vendetta against the industry.
Well, the animal rights people aren't interested in the truth. They got shown the box stalls and the automatic waterers and the rubber mats and the bedding and the fans and the ventilation and all the stuff that we do to take care of our horses that the animal rights people have been lying about for 40 years. Animal rights basically is a belief that human beings do not have any right over to keep animals, to own them, to use them, no matter how well taken care of they are, which is why it's a very fringe extremist movement.
So how has this small group of working carriage drivers managed to survive well-funded animal rights groups, public outrage, and political threats for decades? These past few months have been major for labor movements across the country. The Writers Guild of America strike lasted for 4 months and resulted in massive wins for writers. The United Auto Workers went on strike for a month and a half, and leadership is already planning its next walkout. But amid these headlines about milestone union actions, The small but mighty New York City carriage horse industry hasn't been part of the conversation.
So it was the Teamsters that we were in who helped stop de Blasio. We have, because solidarity is a thing, we have the support of the New York City Central Labor Council, the AFL-CIO. So, it's always been about this, the members that work with horses advocating for the horses as well as for their own economic interests.
Historically, the carriage horse industry was part of the Teamsters, a drivers' union with more than 1.9 million members across Canada and the US. After leaving the Teamsters during the COVID-19 pandemic, the industry joined with Transit Workers United, or TWU, Local 100, which represents more than 40,000 transit workers in and around New York City.
Their slogan is "We Move New York." So it's we joined them right coming out of the pandemic, actually in 2020, and they've been representing us well as sort of like, this is a New York City icon, and when it gets you a seat at the table. For the longest time, politicians would say like, well, why should we meet with the carriage people? It's solidarity. When we're not going to let the millionaires and billionaires that are financing these animal rights groups here in New York City trample on the rights of workers, period.
Unions have stood and continue to stand firmly by the carriage horse industry and their treatment of horses. According to TWU Local 100, the Transport Workers Union of America are committed to protecting these workers' ability to earn a living and support their families in the field of their choice, the historic horse carriage trade. We are equally committed to supporting and advancing the cause of animal welfare. As a private industry regulated by the city, there's been criticism of the union representing carriage horse business owners as well as the people they employ.
Right? It's like political protection. That's what's going on. And really, it's shocking because no one's ever heard of a union behaving this way, in that they would represent owners. But what does that mean for the average carriage driver, and what are they getting out of it? I suppose you could say that they feel that they're getting the protection of the industry to keep going.
Representatives on both sides of this issue come together on one thing. The union has been keeping this issue in play, and maybe it has been all along.
So unions are very powerful in New York City. If not for the union issue, right now we have 19 council members signed on to the bill. You need a majority of the council, so that means you need 26. If it were not for the union issue, we'd have enough votes.
Conversations about this issue have focused on the back and forth between the two sides debating animal welfare, the accusations of abuse and the denials. But at its core, maybe this issue is more broadly a demonstration of the power of unions. One where if elected officials vote in favor of eliminating carriage rides, they risk relationships with thousands of other transit workers.